When the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar empire went pale at the sight of the ring on my finger and whispered, "Where did you get that I knew my life was over, or just beginning?" Minutes earlier, in that same Riverside and Cole conference room, Madison Hale had called it a thrift store tragedy while the whole team laughed. They didn't know it was the same sapphire my father bought for my mother at a London auction worth over $2 million and worth even more in secrets. They didn't know who I really was, but what they didn't know was about to destroy everything they thought they controlled. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from, and hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by someone who was supposed to be on your side. Stories like mine don't happen in silence, and you'll want to hear exactly how this one spiraled out of control. I didn't always know how to disappear. There was a time when I filled every room I walked into, not because I was loud, but because my parents' world was bright enough to make even a quiet child glow. When I was 8, my father used to take me into boardrooms lined with walnut tables and men who spoke in numbers instead of words. I'd sit on the corner chair, swinging my legs, tracing shapes on notepads while he explained market behavior with the ease of someone breathing. His colleagues called him a visionary. I just called him Dad. And back then, he still looked at me like I was the safest part of his universe. Mom would wait outside those meetings, leaning against the glass wall with her arms crossed, pretending to be bored, but smiling every time she saw Dad talking with his hands. She said he looked like he was conducting an orchestra when he was excited. She'd catch my eye through the glass and wiggle her fingers at me, her sapphire ring flashing under the fluorescent lights. The same ring on my hand now. The same ring Madison called a grocery store toy. Back then, the stone looked like a tiny piece of ocean trapped in gold, swirling with a depth only my mother understood. We'd go home to a house always filled with music, jazz on the weekends, classical, when Dad needed to think old French records when Mom was painting. I remember the smell of turpentine and lemon oil blending in the air, sunlight pouring across the hardwood floors, Mom humming under her breath while she arranged furniture for clients. I didn't know it then, but the way she touched objects, slow, deliberate, almost reverent, would matter later. She was shaping a world where beauty meant something, where intention mattered. A world I'd cling to long after she was gone. One night, I heard my parents talking in the kitchen. Mom said, "You work too much." Dad said, "I'm building something for her." Silence followed, warm and full. Then laughter. Their laughter always sounded like two notes from the same chord blending into something perfect. I fell asleep that night thinking nothing in the world could go wrong when two people loved each other that fully. I was wrong, of course, but children always are. The night of the accident is something my memory refuses to hold still. It flickers, fragments, like someone cut the reel of my life into sharp pieces. I remember the rain, first thick slanted sheets smacking the windshield, wipers struggling, Mom's hand reaching over to brush my hair behind my ear, my own voice asking if we could pick up hot chocolate on the way home. She smiled. "Of course, sweetheart." Then a skid, a scream, metal twisting, light exploding. The world spun, and my seatbelt dug so hard into my chest I couldn't breathe. When everything finally stopped, the only sound I heard was the patter of rain on broken glass. I woke up in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and wilted flowers. Dad was sitting beside me, shoulders slumped, face hollowed in a way that didn't belong to him. He didn't cry. Not then. Maybe he'd already run out of tears by the time I opened my eyes. They told me Mom died instantly. I didn't believe it. For weeks I expected her to walk through the door with a paintbrush in her hair, scolding Dad for letting me skip breakfast. But she didn't, and the house, our bright musical house, turned into something empty. Dusty corners, closed curtains. Dad shut himself inside his study for hours, sometimes days. I'd sit outside the door doing my homework just to feel close to him. Sometimes I'd hear him talking quietly, apologizing to someone who wasn't there. I didn't know it then, but grief was carving him into someone new, someone sharper, quieter, unreachable. And it was carving something into me too. Silence. Guilt. A feeling that maybe if I hadn't asked for hot chocolate, we would have taken a different road, a different turn, a different fate. When I turned 18, Dad called me into his study. The air smelled like old books and whiskey. He looked older than the man I grew up with. His hair had more gray, and his shoulders carried something invisible but crushing. On the table between us was a stack of folders, a small velvet box, and a resignation I didn't understand yet. He told me he couldn't live in the world he'd built anymore. Too many reminders. Too many ghosts. He was stepping back from everything: his company, his legacy, his life in public. Then he pushed the velvet box toward me. Inside was Mom's ring. The sapphire looked darker than I remembered, like it carried the storm that took her. He said, "This is yours now. But Lena, listen to me. You need to build something that belongs to you, not to me." His voice cracked once barely. "Change your name. Don't tell anyone who you are. Don't use my resources. Don't let anyone compare you to me. Promise me you'll make your own way." I asked why. Why couldn't I be both his daughter and myself? Why did everything have to be so absolute? He just looked at me with a pain so deep it numbed me. "Because my shadow is too big," he said. "You'll never escape it unless you walk away from it now." We argued loudly, painfully. I accused him of punishing me for Mom's death. He didn't deny it. Maybe he couldn't. I ran out of the room crying, the ring clutched in my hand so tightly the metal left marks on my palm. I didn't know it then, but that fight would become the last real conversation we had for years. I moved into a small apartment, paid for college, and kept my promise. I built a life out of secondhand furniture and discount groceries. I worked internships nobody wanted. I learned to stretch $20 across a week. And every time I felt like calling Dad, I remembered his face in that study, broken, pleading, determined, and I stayed silent. But silence doesn't erase blood, or legacy, or the way grief shapes a person. It just buries it deeper. And I didn't know it back then, but every small moment, the boardrooms of my childhood, the ring on my mother's hand, the night rain swallowed our car, would come crashing back the moment Samuel Grant recognized the sapphire on my finger. College was where I perfected the art of shrinking. When you grow up surrounded by people who speak in millions and percentages, then suddenly find yourself working 3 campus jobs to afford textbooks, humility isn't just a choice, it's survival. I kept my head down. I didn't go to parties. I didn't date. I didn't tell anyone my father once shaped markets with a single sentence. I learned to live inside my silence, molding myself into someone unremarkable. And yet numbers, my old companions, never abandoned me. They made sense when nothing else did. They didn't ask who I was or what I'd lost. They didn't care about grief. They simply were. The truth is, every spreadsheet I mastered, every model I built was a rebellion. A quiet, stubborn rebellion against the idea that I needed my father's name to be good at something. Finals came and went. Job fairs came and went. Recruiters barely looked at me twice. Cheap clothes, no pedigree, no family name to attach to their reports. I could have changed that with one confession. One sentence: "I'm Richard Brooks's daughter," and every door would have opened. But a promise is a promise, even when it hurts, even when it feels like chains. Eventually, I landed my first real job at a financial firm that treated junior analysts like office furniture, functional but invisible. I didn't mind. Invisibility was familiar by then. I kept learning, kept building, kept pushing myself to be undeniable. And for a while I thought maybe that was enough. Until Riverside and Cole came along with its gleaming lobby and glass offices and whispers of innovation. They wanted hungry talent. I was starving. My first day there, I walked in wearing my best thrifted blazer, the one with the lining that always slipped out if I moved too fast. The receptionist barely glanced up. The elevator ride felt like stepping into a world several floors above where I truly belonged. Then I saw Madison Hale, tall, red-lipped, perfectly tailored. The kind of woman who smelled like expensive perfume and unearned confidence. She turned as I passed her, her eyes scanning me like I was an insect on her windshield. She said "New." I nodded. She smiled, without warmth. "Cute. Try not to get eaten alive." I didn't know it then, but Madison had already scented blood. She could tell I wasn't one of them. In my first month, she scrutinized everything. My clothes, my hair, the cheap lunches I packed in reused grocery bags. Each jab small enough to be deniable, sharp enough to land. "Oh," she'd say, eyeing my shoes, "that's practical." Or leaning over my desk, "You know, you'd blend in better if you tried a little harder." She said it like generosity, but her friends Olivia, Marcy, 2 others whose names I never bothered learning, laughed behind their manicured hands. I swallowed it. Because I needed the job. Because I was tired. because disappearing was easier than fighting. Then came the day she noticed my ring. The sapphire glinted under the office lights and her gaze locked onto it like a hawk spotting prey. "Vintage?" she asked, tilting her head. "No offense, but it looks sentimental." I knew that tone. It was the same one kids used in school when they saw my off-brand sneakers. I said nothing, sliding my hand under the desk. I didn't know it then, but this was the first crack, the place where everything would later explode. Months passed. Madison stole credit. Charles Hale pretended to mentor me while using my work to make Madison look brilliant. Kelly tried to hype me up, telling me my models were the best in the department, that I deserved more. I never believed her. Or maybe I didn't let myself. Confidence was a luxury I hadn't been able to afford for a long time. One night, during a rare lull, Kelly brought Thai takeout to my cubicle. "You ever gonna tell me why you wear that ring every day?" she asked, slurping noodles. I froze. I wasn't used to people noticing things about me really noticing. "It was my mom's," I said quietly. Kelly reached out, touched my wrist. "It's pretty, old, probably worth something." I laughed, a short, bitter sound. Not to anyone but me. She didn't push further. That was one thing I loved about Kelly, she knew when to stop. What I didn't know was that the next week, when she saw me working on a model far more complex than our team typically handled, curiosity would push her to do something reckless. She snapped a screenshot. A tiny click I never heard. She sent it to a friend in venture capital, asking, "Is this good, or am I biased because I like her?" She didn't expect her friend to forward it. She didn't expect that friend to have ties to Grant Tech. And neither of us could have predicted that the CEO himself, Samuel Grant, would see the model and wonder briefly who the hell L. Brooks was. I didn't know any of that then. I just kept working, kept surviving, kept shrinking. Flashbacks come in strange ways. Sometimes they arrive as fully formed memories. Sometimes they're just colors or smells. For me, it was always rain that brought the past back. Rain on glass, rain on asphalt, rain hammering against the bus window as I rode home after late nights. Every raindrop carried the echo of that night, my mother's voice, my father's silence. One evening, after Madison told the entire team that some people don't have the face or the wardrobe for client work, I went home and sat in the dark. I looked at the ring, turning it in the dim light of my lamp. The gold was warm against my skin, the stone deep blue like a bruise. I whispered, "I'm trying, Mom," and it felt like a confession, or a lie, because the truth was I wasn't trying for myself. I was trying for a promise made in a room that smelled like whiskey and grief. A promise that had shaped every choice I'd made. I didn't know it then, not fully, but every moment of smallness, every night spent fixing someone else's mistakes, every humiliation I swallowed, for the sake of staying hidden. All of it was building toward the morning when Samuel Grant would walk past my cubicle, see the sapphire flash, and stop breathing. And when he asked, "Who is your father?" the walls of my careful, quiet life would crack open. If there's one thing I've learned about cruelty, it's that it rarely arrives as a single event. It comes in waves. Slow, steady, relentless. Each one just small enough that you tell yourself it's not worth reacting to, not worth the risk, not worth the noise. But over time, the tide rises, and before you know it, you're drowning in something you should have fought long ago. My drowning began quietly. The first real incident at Riverside and Cole happened 3 months into the job. I had just finished a risk analysis worksheet for a mid-tier tech client, something tedious that everyone hated doing, but something I was genuinely good at. Numbers calm me. Formulas make sense when people don't. I turned in my draft to Madison Protocol and expected maybe a nod or a dry "looks fine." Instead, I watched her scroll through my spreadsheet, eyes unblinking, jaw tight. "This is a lot," she finally said. "Too much?" I asked. Her lips curved. "No, too good." Before I could understand what that meant, she clicked her trackpad twice, dragged my name out of the header, and typed in her own. I blinked. "Madison." She didn't even look at me. "Don't take it personally, Lena. Juniors don't need credit. They need exposure." Exposure. That word burned. Like a spotlight someone else gets to shine while you're pushed deeper into the dark. Later that day, I overheard her talking to Charles in his office. The door was open just a crack. "Brilliant work," he said. "I'm impressed." Madison giggled, a light practice sound. "Just something I put together last night." I stood in the hallway, gripping a folder so tightly it creased under my fingers. Every part of me wanted to storm and say something, reclaim what was mine, but I didn't. Because I knew exactly what would happen. Charles would smile politely. Madison would arch a brow. I'd be labeled difficult, and difficult people don't survive in places like this. I swallowed it. The humiliation carved deeper than I thought. But it didn't stop there. Cruelty rarely does. The next wave came during a Monday morning meeting. Madison had assigned me to help her prepare a pitch for a retail client looking to reposition themselves in a competitive market. I built a full model over the weekend: customer spend patterns, seasonal projections, supply chain volatility, all of it clean and airtight. The meeting began with Charles asking, "So what are we presenting?" Madison flipped her hair over one shoulder. "Well, the idea came to me Saturday night." I stared at her. Saturday night, she was at a rooftop bar posting stories of champagne pyramids and glitter dresses. She clicked the slide. My work, my formulas. Except this time, she hadn't even bothered removing my initials buried in the sheet metadata. I felt my face heat. My pulse climbed into my throat. I just waited for someone, anyone, to notice, to ask, to give me a chance. No one did. When the meeting ended, Kelly caught my arm. "Say something," she whispered fiercely. "Literally, anything." "I can't." "Why?" "Because I had a promise, not just to my father, but to myself. A promise that I'd build my life on merit, not on conflict or connection or name-dropping. Because speaking up felt like ripping open a door I'd spent years bolting shut. Because silence felt safer, even when it hurt. 2 weeks later, Madison escalated. It was a normal Thursday. Gray skies, weak coffee, exhaustion staining everyone's faces. As usual, I arrived early, hoping to get an hour of quiet before the chaos. I was halfway through refining a model when I heard laughter sharp echoing through the hall. Madison swept in with her entourage, heels clicking like a metronome of menace. "Lena," she said, drawing out my name like it tasted bad. "Quick question." I tensed. "Yes." She pointed at my blazer. "Do you own more than one outfit?" The girls behind her snickered. I opened my mouth, closed it again. This is different from yesterday's." "Right." Madison snapped her fingers. "Yesterday was the beige disaster. Today is the gray tragedy. Totally different vibe." More laughter. I felt heat rising in my cheeks. My ring felt suddenly heavy, the metal biting into my skin. I tucked my hand under the desk instinctively, but Madison noticed. "Oh, the ring," she said loudly. "This is my favorite part. Hold it up, girls, look at it." I didn't move. I couldn't. So she reached out and grabbed my hand herself. Her fingers were ice cold. "I mean, it's cute if you're going for an I found this in a forgotten jewelry box at a yard sale. Aesthetic." Her entourage burst out laughing again. Kelly, sitting 3 desks away, froze mid-keystroke, eyes blazing. "Let go," I whispered. Madison blinked, surprised by my tone. She released my hand and stepped back. "That was uncalled for," Kelly snapped. Madison smirked. "Relax, Kelly. It's not my fault she dresses like she's allergic to fashion." Kelly pushed her chair back. "What is your problem with her problem?" Madison echoed, innocent. "I don't have a problem. I'm just being honest. Honesty is allowed, isn't it?" My throat tightened. This wasn't honesty. This was cruelty disguised as candor, wrapped in privilege, sharpened by entitlement. But the worst part, everyone else pretended not to see. Charles walked by, moments later glanced at us, hesitated for half a second, and kept walking. He had heard. He always heard. But he never intervened. Silence was easier. It carved deeper than I thought. The 4th wave hit harder than the rest. It was performance review season. Stress hung in the air like static before a storm. I'd worked myself to the edge of collapse: late nights, early mornings, perfect numbers, perfect execution. I expected a solid rating. Not glowing, not exceptional, just fair. But fairness doesn't exist in places run by people like Madison. I sat across from her in a small glass office. She was reviewing my file, red pen in hand. "Your work is good," she said, tapping the paper, "but your presence is lacking." "Presence," I repeated. "You're too quiet, too meek, not collaborative enough." My jaw tightened. "I collaborate with everyone. I take on extra assignments. That's part of the issue," she cut in. "You take on extra, but don't communicate proactively. It feels secretive. Secretive." The word hit like a dart aimed at the part of me I hid most viciously. Madison leaned back, crossing her legs. I'm giving you a meets expectations. But honestly, Lena, if you want to grow here, you'll need to act like you belong. Act like I belong. Not be competent. Not be valuable. Act. I walked out of that room feeling smaller than ever. The office lights seemed colder. The floor seemed harder beneath my shoes. The world felt like it was pushing me into a shrinking box carved specifically for people like me. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, cross-legged on the floor, staring at my mother's ring. I remembered the way she used to spin it on her finger while thinking. I tried it, but it didn't feel like her. It felt like an anchor, something holding me in place, something reminding me that I'd chosen this path, the path of silence, obedience, humility, and for what? To be mocked, dismissed, buried. I didn't know it then, but I was already nearing the moment I'd break. Cruelty kept coming. Another wave rose the following week when Madison group emailed the entire department. The subject line was professional presentation reminders. Inside was a list of dress code guidelines written with exaggerated politeness but dripping with implication. Avoid worn-out shoes. Avoid outfits that appear recycled. Avoid accessories that distract from a polished corporate image. Avoid excessive sentimentality in attire. That last line made my stomach drop. It was about my ring. Kelly stormed over. She's targeting you. I stared at the email until the words blurred. If I react, she wins. No, Kelly hissed. If you stay quiet, she wins. But quiet was all I knew, and the tide kept rising. 2 days later, the wave finally crashed. It was near 6 p.m. Most people had left. Madison sauntered by my desk, heels echoing in the emptying office. By the way, she said, pausing for the Whitman pitch tomorrow, I'll need you to stay late. Clean up the financial model. It's a mess. I frowned. I didn't build that model, I know, but you can fix it faster. Madison, I have a deadline for the Parker report. She cut me off with a raised hand. Lena, if you want to stay employed, I suggest you prioritize what I tell you to. Her words were soft, but the threat underneath was razor sharp. Kelly stood from her desk. She can't keep doing this. Oh, please, Madison scoffed. I'm giving her opportunities. Whether she appreciates them is her choice. Opportunities. That a word again. I looked at the spreadsheet Madison had dumped on me. It wasn't just messy, it was wrong. Incorrect formulas. Misaligned assumptions. A total disaster. My chest tightened. These numbers would sink the pitch. Then fix them. I don't have enough time, I protested. Her smile chilled the air. Then I guess we'll find out tomorrow if you're as good as everyone says. Everyone, meaning no one. No one said anything. No one noticed. No one cared. I stayed until almost midnight fixing a model that wasn't mine. Not because I wanted to save Madison, but because if our pitch failed, the fallout wouldn't land on her. It would land on our whole team. On me. On Kelly. On people who didn't deserve it. The fluorescents above buzzed like insects. My eyes burned. My shoulders ached. By the time I closed my laptop, every nerve in my body felt frayed. I rode the bus home in silence, forehead pressed to the cool window, watching the city blur into streaks of light. Rain tapped against the glass, soft at first, then harder. A storm rolling in. Always the rain. Always the memories. Always the feeling that I was trapped in the same night that took everything from me. I didn't know it then, but that storm would be nothing compared to the one coming. And it would hit the very next morning. I woke the next morning with a migraine throbbing behind my eyes, the kind that comes from too much screen time, too little sleep, and too many pieces of yourself chipped away. My alarm felt like a hammer. My apartment felt too small. My chest felt tight with the familiar dread that came with walking back into that polished battlefield they called an office. Still I went, because people like me always go. We keep our heads down. We keep our promises. We keep moving even when everything inside us is screaming to stop. The sky outside was heavy with clouds the color of bruised steel. I mentally added that to the growing list of omens I'd been collecting since starting at Riverside and Cole. Elevator to the 17th floor. Hallway smelling faintly of burnt coffee and cologne. Fake smiles. Clicking heels. Everything exactly the same except for the knowledge that today, we were presenting the Whitman pitch using the model I'd rebuilt overnight. Kelly met me at my desk with 2 coffees, one for her, one for me. She handed mine over without a word, studying my face, like she could see the cracks forming beneath the surface. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm fine. You look like you spent all night fighting demons." I forced a smile. I was. Excel demons. She snorted, but her concern didn't fade. "If Madison tries anything today, I swear I'll Kelly." "What, don't get yourself fired for me?" Her jaw tightened. "Maybe someone needs to get fired around here, and it shouldn't be you." Before I could answer, Madison walked in. Perfect hair, perfect lipstick, perfectly cruel eyes. She didn't look at me. She looked through me like I was part of the office furniture. The meeting started at 9. Madison delivered the pitch with flawless confidence. My numbers, my insights, my architecture beneath her rehearsed charm. She didn't stumble once. Not because she was brilliant, but because I had made the work brilliant for her. The partners nodded approvingly. Charles Hale leaned back in satisfaction. Madison smiled like she'd invented gravity. And I sat there invisible, pretending it didn't feel like I was being slowly erased from my own life. After the meeting, Charles pulled Madison aside. The glass walls of the conference room meant their conversation was visible even if muffled. Kelly elbowed me gently. "He's praising her," she muttered. I knew. He's literally telling her she carried the team. I knew that too. Madison turned slightly, her gaze landing on me with a triumphant glint. Like victory tasted sweet, and humiliation tasted sweeter. That afternoon brought yet another one that nearly knocked me under. An email. CC'd to the entire department. Subject: maintaining professional standards. Madison's words, of course, wrapped in HR-friendly phrasing but sharpened into a blade. As representatives of Riverside and Cole, our appearance reflects our brand. Please ensure that attire and accessories meet the level of professionalism expected in client-facing environments. Accessories. She meant the ring. She meant my mother. She meant the only piece of my life before grief that I still held onto. My vision blurred as I read the email again and again. The ring suddenly felt like fire on my hand. I curled my fingers into a fist. Kelly marched to Madison's desk. "Are you kidding me?" Madison blinked at her with wide, innocent eyes. "Something wrong?" "You know exactly what you're doing," Kelly Charles called sharply from his office doorway. "A word." Kelly froze. I shook my head at her, pleading silently. She exhaled, swallowed her anger, and walked away. Later, she returned to her desk looking furious and defeated. "He said I was being unprofessional," she muttered. "He said you're sensitive, and that I need to stop enabling conflict." I laughed, quiet, bitter. Of course he did. The day dragged on. The office felt colder. My skin felt thinner. Every sound seemed too loud, keyboards clicking, printers humming, someone's laughter too sharp in the distance. I worked until my eyes went blurry, not because I needed to, but because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant breaking. At 3 p.m., Madison walked past my cubicle with Olivia and Marcy flanking her like glittering guard dogs. "I'm just saying," Madison said loudly, "if someone can't afford to dress the part, maybe they're in the wrong industry. Consulting isn't charity." Olivia tossed her hair. Maybe she could try retail. I kept typing, pretending I didn't hear, pretending it didn't hurt, pretending I hadn't heard versions of that line my entire life, from kids, from relatives, from professors, from people who thought quiet meant weak. Madison paused at my desk. "You agree, don't you, Lena?" I looked up slowly. "About what?" "That some people simply don't fit here." My throat tightened. My heart pounded so loudly it felt like the whole office could hear it. "I'm just doing my job," I whispered. Madison's smile stretched cold and thin. "Then try harder." That was the moment something inside me cracked, not enough to shatter, not yet, but enough to expose the first fracture. The second came the next morning. I arrived early again. Dawn barely rising. The office empty. Or so I thought. As I turned the corner, I saw Charles at Madison's desk. They weren't talking like boss and employee. They were talking like father and daughter conspiring over a scheme they both benefited from. "You're set for the Grant Tech pitch," Charles said. "You present, you lead. This is your chance." Madison beamed. And Lena Charles lowered his voice, but I still heard every word. "She's a great analyst, but analysts don't close deals. She's not leadership material." My chest constricted, my nails dug into my palms. Leadership material. As if leadership meant cruelty. As if collaboration meant invisibility. As if competence meant nothing beside cosmetics. I backed away before they saw me, heart-pounding, breath-tight, vision stinging. I sat at my desk, staring at the wall, feeling something dark gather inside me, something heavy, unfamiliar. It wasn't anger. Not exactly. It was recognition. The slow dawning understanding that I had been small for so long that everyone believed smallness was all I had to offer. The third fracture came later that week in the restroom. I stood in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection. My hair looked flat. My blazer was wrinkled. My eyes were ringed with exhaustion. I barely recognized myself, not because I'd changed, but because I'd finally stopped pretending the change was temporary. Kelly pushed the door open. She held out a coffee, a real one, not the stale break room kind. "Here," she said softly. "I'm fine," I muttered. "No, you're not. And that's okay." The kindness made everything worse. My chest collapsed. Tears blurred my vision. I leaned on the sink, shoulders shaking. Kelly touched my back. "You have to tell HR. Or tell Charles. Or tell someone." "I can't," I whispered. "Why?" "Because telling someone meant opening the door to the truth about my father. Because I had built my life on silence, and speaking up meant tearing down everything I'd spent years protecting. Because once the truth came out, nothing would ever go back to the way it was." I couldn't explain any of that, so I said the only thing I could. "Some battles aren't worth fighting." Kelly stepped in front of me, eyes fierce. "This one is." Before I could answer, the bathroom door opened. Madison walked in, saw my red eyes, saw Kelly's glare, and smiled, a slow, wicked smile. "You know," she said casually, washing her hands, "crying at work is not a great look. People might think you're overwhelmed." Kelly snapped, "You're unbelievable." Madison dried her hands and looked at herself in the mirror, just speaking the truth. She glanced at me with false sympathy. "Don't worry, Lena. Not everyone is built for this world." That was the fourth fracture, the one that reached bone. The fifth came the following week, the one that would push me to the edge of breaking. We were preparing for the Grant Tech pitch, the biggest opportunity the company had seen in years. Numbers flying, deadlines tightening, pressure rising like steam in a locked room. Madison was frantic in the way privileged people get frantic, loud, dramatic, but never actually accountable. The financial model for the pitch was a disaster. Wrong projections, outdated indices, incorrect growth assumptions. Any decent investor would tear it apart in seconds. I approached Madison cautiously. "This model isn't accurate. The projections need to be updated." Madison waved a dismissive hand. "Investors don't read models. They read confidence." "I'm telling you it's wrong. Then fix it." "I don't have enough time." Her smile sharpened. "Then you should have worked faster." I froze. I wasn't assigned to this until today. She leaned in, voice cool and venomous. "If you want to stay on this team, Lena, you'll do what needs to be done." Threat, clear as crystal. Kelly stood up. "You can't dump this on her last minute." Madison didn't even turn. "Stay out of this." Kelly scoffed. "Make me." Charles appeared, then summoned by tension like a shark to blood. "What's happening?" Madison turned sweet. "Nothing. Lena's just overwhelmed again. It happens." His eyes skimmed over my face, red from lack of sleep, ring still on my hand, shoulders hunched in defeat, and he nodded like he understood something deep about me. He didn't. But his misunderstanding cut just as sharply. I stayed until nearly 11 p.m. that night, fixing a model that should never have reached my desk. The office emptied out. The lights buzzed softly overhead. The city outside glowed through the windows, alive and indifferent. I worked with mechanical precision, but inside I felt hollow, angry, exhausted. Something worse than all three. And in the silent hours of that night, alone with my spreadsheets and my mother's ring, I finally faced the truth. I wasn't drowning because of Madison. I was drowning because I kept choosing silence. Because I kept trying to earn my place in a world that had no intention of giving me one. But I didn't know then, not fully, that the tide was about to turn. That the next morning would be the beginning of the storm. That everything Madison had built her kingdom on would crack the moment Samuel Grant stepped onto our floor. And the life I had constructed out of shadows and promises would break open under the weight of one question. One name. One ring. The morning of the Grant Tech visit felt wrong before anything even happened. The office buzzed with a nervous electricity I'd never felt before. Too sharp, too frantic, too desperate. People hurried past my desk carrying stacks of printouts. Charles barked orders like a man trying to hold together a structure already beginning to crack. And Madison. She was glowing. A predator who smelled victory. Kelly rushed toward me the moment I stepped off the elevator, eyes wide. "He's here early," she whispered. "Grant, he just showed up." Charles practically had a meltdown. Early. Of course. Powerful people rarely show up when expected. They arrive when it suits them, and everyone else adapts. I slipped into my seat, trying to steady my breath. My hands trembled over my keyboard. The sapphire ring caught a sliver of light from the window, a blue flare across my skin. I spun it once, twice, the familiar ritual that usually calmed me. Today it didn't. At 9:12, the office fell into a hush. The elevator dinged. And then he appeared. Samuel Grant. Gray hair, sharp eyes, posture of a man who had built empires brick by relentless brick. 2 security staff flanked him, scanning the room. He didn't walk so much as he absorbed spaces, drawing every gaze without asking for it. Charles rushed forward, smile stretched too wide. "Mr. Grant. Welcome." Grant lifted a hand. Not rudely, just disinterested. "I prefer to see how people work before they present to me." And he stepped past Charles like he wasn't even there. The room stiffened. Keyboards clicked louder. People straightened their backs, fixed their hair. Even Madison pulled her shoulders back and tried to look effortlessly brilliant. But Grant didn't look at her. He wasn't looking at anyone. He was scanning, observing, taking inventory. Slowly, methodically, he walked between cubicles. His eyes flicked to screens, paperwork, faces. The closer he came, the tighter my chest became. Because something inside me, some instinct older than reason, whispered a warning. Then it happened. The moment that cleaved my life into before and after. Grant froze 3 feet from my desk. Not stumbled, not paused, froze. His eyes dropped to my hand, to my ring, to the sapphire my mother wore every day of her life, the sapphire he saw purchased 17 years ago under the lights of a London auction house. The color drained from his face. His breath stuttered. His posture, so crisp moments earlier, buckled for a split second like memory had punched him straight in the chest. Slowly, he lifted his gaze to mine. Those sharp eyes were no longer assessing. They were searching. "That ring," he whispered. His voice wasn't gravel, now it was ash. "Where did you get that ring?" The entire office went still. Kelly turned in her chair. Madison stiffened. Charles blinked, rapidly confused. My throat closed. It was my mother's. His pupils contracted. "Your mother." The words came out strained, like they cost him something to say. He stepped closer, and his security mirrored him, tense. "Where did she get it?" I swallowed, heart beating so hard it echoed in my ears. "My father gave it to her." Grant's hands shook. Actually, shook. The man who built one of the biggest conglomerates in America trembled just looking at me. "What is your father's name?" he asked. Voice cracked open with something unnameable. Every instinct in me screamed to lie, to protect, to stay hidden. But something in his expression, shock, grief, recognition, cut through my fear. "Richard?" I whispered. "Richard Brooks." A sound tore out of him. Not a shout, not a gasp. Something human and raw scraped from the center of him. "Oh my God," he murmured. "It's you." He turned suddenly to the crowd gathering behind him. His voice rose with certainty, authority, fury. "You have no idea who this woman is." The room erupted into whispering. People stood. Chairs slid back. Madison's face went pale as stone. Grant pointed to me. "This is the daughter of Richard Brooks, one of the greatest minds in investment history. A man who built half of what modern venture capital stands on. A man who trusted me with everything when he stepped away from the world." Charles staggered. "Sir, there must be some mistake. She's—" "Quiet," Grant snapped. The command cracked like a whip. Charles fell silent. Grant turned to me again. Softer this time. "Your father never told me where you went." I looked, Lena. I truly did. "And now I find you here." He gestured around the room, voice thickening. "Being treated like this?" Madison's breath hitched audibly. "Oh yes, he knew everything." His next words were knives. "I arrived early yesterday. I heard the meeting you all had." Silence. Pure, deathly silence. I heard, he said coldly, "the way you humiliated her, mocked her clothes, insulted her mother's ring, laughed at a woman who outworks every person in this building." Madison took a step back, hand flying to her chest. "Mr. Grant, I do not speak." he barked. She froze mid-breath. Grant turned slowly, surveying the office like a battlefield. This culture of cruelty, this entitlement, this mediocrity wrapped in arrogance. I will not partner with a company that treats its best talent like disposable trash. Charles paled. Sir, the deal is dead. Gasps rippled across the room. One woman covered her mouth. Someone in the back whispered, 300 million. But Grant wasn't finished. His fury wasn't finished. He looked at me once more. Your father entrusted me with managing his assets. He trusted me to protect what mattered most to him. And he never told me he had a daughter. His voice softened to something ragged. Lena, does he know you're here? I shook my head, a tiny movement. We haven't spoken in 3 years. Pain flashed across his face. Real pain. He deserves to know the truth. He deserves to know what you've endured. He pulled out his phone and dialed. Right there in front of everyone. My breath stopped. The room held its breath too. Richard, he said when the line connected. I found her. My knees almost gave out. A beat of silence. Then my father's voice. Older, rougher, but unmistakable. Found who Grant's eyes filled. Your daughter. The world tilted. My vision blurred. My pulse hammered against my ribs. He put the phone on speaker, and everything inside me snapped open. Lena. My father's voice cracked. Lena, are you there? I stepped forward, trembling. Hi. Dad? A choked sound broke through the speaker. I'm so sorry, he said, just like that. No pretense, no armor. I never should have let you disappear alone. I thought I was protecting you. I don't know what I thought. My throat closed. I kept the promise. I know, he whispered. But it cost you too much. Grant cleared his throat gently. Richard, she's been bullied here, targeted, humiliated, and she said nothing. My father's breath turned sharp. Put me on video. Grant did. He held up the screen, and I saw my father's face for the first time in years. Older, sadder, but still the man who used to lift me onto his shoulders. He looked at me like I was still that little girl, like he'd been missing a piece of himself and finally found it again. Oh, sweetheart. His voice trembled. Come home. Let me make this right. I couldn't speak, could only nod. Tears blurred everything. Then I heard Madison. A small, breathless whisper. I'm so sorry. I turned. She looked shattered, makeup smudged, confidence gone. I didn't know, she whispered. If I had, you would have treated me better, I asked quietly. She flinched, because we both knew the answer. Grant stepped forward again, cold fury restored. You should know, he told her, that every major executive in this city will hear about this. You didn't just humiliate a colleague, you humiliated the daughter of one of the most respected men in finance. Your reputation will follow you for years. Madison swayed like she might faint. Charles spoke up weakly. Mr. Grant, surely we can salvage numbed one word, sharp as steel. No partnership, no contract, and I strongly recommend the board reevaluate your leadership. Charles's face collapsed. Someone in HR began crying. Someone else whispered, we're done. But all I could hear was my father's voice through the speaker. He whispered, Lena, I'm coming to you tonight. Grant lowered the phone, giving me a moment of privacy in a room full of people who suddenly realized how small they really were. He put a hand on my shoulder. Your father is proud of you, he said quietly. He always has been, even when he didn't know how to show it. The office around us felt unreal, silent, frozen. Madison sank into a chair, staring at nothing. Charles staggered into his office, already preparing for the fallout. And I stood in the center of it all, breathing for the first time in years. Not hidden, not erased, not invisible, seen. The life I'd carved out of ashes and silence was gone, now cracked open, exposed to the world. But something new, something terrifying and freeing had taken its place. I didn't know yet what revenge looked like. I didn't know yet what power felt like. But I knew this. Everything they used to break me would become the weapon that rebuilt me. The hours after the implosion felt unreal, like the world was moving underwater, and I was the only one breathing air. Word spread through the office faster than any memo ever had, people whispering my name in disbelief, others pretending they'd always known I was different, a few staring at me like I'd suddenly grown a crown. I didn't want any of it. Not the stares, not the whispers, not the sudden shift from invisibility to awe. Kelly stayed close, hovering protectively like she expected someone to throw a punch. Maybe she wasn't wrong. Envy has sharp teeth. We packed my things slowly, mostly because I kept pausing to breathe. Every drawer I emptied felt like peeling away another piece of the life I had built here. The quiet, the anonymity, the smallness I had once mistaken for safety. You okay? Kelly finally asked. No, I said honestly, but I think I will be. She nodded, then lowered her voice. There's something I need to tell you, before this gets bigger. My stomach tightened. What? She hesitated, rare for her. Remember that model you built a few months ago? The one you said was too advanced for this team? Yes, I sent it to someone. I blinked at her. What I didn't tell you, because I knew you'd freak out. But Lena, you're brilliant. And watching you get buried here, it made me sick. So I forwarded it to a friend at a fund, just to show them what you could do. My pulse quickened. Kelly, I thought maybe someone out there would see you. The real you. She bit her lip. My friend forwarded it to someone at Grant Tech. I didn't know it would ever reach Samuel Grant. I swear, You wanted to help me. I finished for her. She nodded, eyes shiny. Yeah, I did. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. The information hit me somewhere deep, unlocking something tangled inside me. For years, I'd believed that invisibility was my shield, that staying small kept me safe. But someone had seen me anyway. Someone had believed in me more than I'd ever believed in myself. I reached out and squeezed her hand. Thank you. Relief washed across her face. I was terrified you'd be mad. I'm not mad. For the first time in years, I felt light. Kelly, you saved me. We hugged, brief, but real. The kind of hug that anchors you after a storm. When we walked back into the open office to leave, the atmosphere had shifted again. Some eyes were apologetic. Others were calculating. A few were afraid of what I was, of what I represented, of the fallout still unfolding. Madison sat at her desk motionless, a cardboard box beside her. Her mascara had smudged into smoky shadows under her eyes. She didn't look at anyone, but she did look up when I passed her. For a moment, just a heartbeat, our eyes met. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Maybe she wanted to apologize. Maybe she wanted to explain. Maybe she wanted to beg. But none of it mattered. Not anymore. I didn't gloat. I didn't glare. I didn't smile. I simply said, "Goodbye, Madison." Her face crumpled, not dramatically, not theatrically, just quietly, because she knew. She knew she had spent years building her identity on the wrong foundation, and it had finally collapsed under her. When Kelly and I stepped outside, the city air hit me like a shock. Cool, sharp, alive. I breathed it in. It tasted like something new, something possible. Grant's driver waited by the curb, sleek black car, tinted windows. As we approached, the driver dipped his head. "Miss Brooks," he said respectfully. "Mr. Grant asked me to bring you to the hotel when you're ready." Kelly whistled under her breath. "Okay, wow. This is your life now?" I laughed softly. "I guess so." She hugged me again. "Call me later, or I'll hunt you down. I will. I promise." The car ride felt surreal, like stepping through a portal into a world I'd left behind years ago. The city passed by in ribbons of gold and steel. I stared down at my ring, letting the sapphire catch the fading sunlight. For the first time, the weight of it didn't feel like pressure. It felt like history, legacy, power. The car pulled up to the hotel, a quiet, elegant place overlooking the water. Grant was waiting outside, hands in his coat pockets, posture tense but expectant. When I stepped out, he gave me a small smile. "Your father is already upstairs. He's anxious." My breath hitched. "So am I." "You'll be okay," he said gently. "You two have a great deal to talk about, a great deal to repair. But I think he's ready to try." I nodded, throat too tight for words. Grant hesitated, then added, "Before you go up, there's something else." He reached into his coat and pulled out a thin leather folder. "This is a proposal for your future." My future. Yes, Grant Tech could use someone like you. Someone who sees what others miss. Someone who doesn't just understand numbers, but understands people. He paused. "Or if you prefer, I will personally back you in starting your own firm. One built on the values you never compromised, even when everyone around you did." My breath caught. "You'd do that?" He nodded. "For Richard's daughter. And for you." I opened the folder briefly, a flash of potential, of power, of doors I never thought I'd touch. "They thought they had destroyed you," Grant said quietly. But they only exposed what they were too blind to see. The elevator chimed behind me. My heart pounded. My future, whatever it would become, waited above. I closed the folder and met Grant's steady gaze. "Thank you," I said. He bowed his head slightly. "Choose what feels right, Lena, not what feels safe." As I stepped into the elevator, the doors sliding shut, I felt a strange calm settle over me. A sense that the world was shifting under my feet, not collapsing, but realigning. They thought I was small. They thought I was weak. They thought I was no one. But what they didn't know was I had only ever played small, because I believed that was the price of keeping my promise. Now the promise was broken open. Now the world saw me. Now I had a choice. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of choosing power. If you've ever felt invisible, overlooked, or treated like you didn't belong, remember this: your story isn't finished. Not even close. What happened to me at Riverside and Cole was only the beginning, and what comes next will be written on my terms, not theirs. So if any part of my journey hits something inside you, hit subscribe, stay with me, and share your story too. No one rises alone, and this isn't where mine ends. Not by a long shot. The people who tried to break me have no idea what's coming next.